In this video, I'll explain glycemic index and load and why those matter, what is a low glycemic diet, how to decrease the glycemic load of some plant foods, and finally, what to do to blunt the blood sugar spikes after you've eaten something with high glycemic load. First, let me say that you can download the full guide to low glycemic diet following the link up here or in the description. Besides the information presented in this video, it also addresses disease prevention with low glycemic diet and the limitations of both glycemic index and load. That being said, let us start with glycemic index and glycemic load. Did you know that not all carbs are the same? Some of them create much greater blood sugar fluctuations than others. It's important to remember that foods containing lots of sugar, quick carbs, are rapidly absorbed into the blood and therefore raise our blood sugar levels immediately. Consequently, a fast drop in blood sugar levels follows. This causes irritability, difficulties with concentration, a sudden surge of tiredness, fogginess, and cravings for something sweet or another cup of coffee. What is the glycemic index? You've probably seen the abbreviation GI on food packages. This tells you whether the carbohydrate in the particular food is slow or fast. You can see the low and high GI values right here. Now the problem with GI is it doesn't indicate how large the proportion of a carb in a food is and how it will affect your blood sugar levels. This is where glycemic load comes to rescue. It takes into account the regular portion of the particular food and therefore enables us to have a much better idea of the actual impact the food has on our blood sugar levels. Again, here you can see the values of high and low glycemic load. I'll give you a few examples to illustrate the matter. Let's take watermelon. Did you know that it has a high GI but a low GL? It has a GI of 72, but a GL of only 4 of a regular 120 gram serving. It's because foods that have high water or fiber content won't create dramatic blood sugar fluctuations despite their high GI values. Such foods include watermelon, cucumbers, apples, carrots, and beetroots, for example. This of course applies when eaten in moderation. Okay, very well, but how do you use this information in your daily life and make it work in your benefit? What exactly is a low glycemic diet? In a few words, you are eating a low glycemic diet if you don't get more than 20 GL points per meal and not more than 100 points daily. I'll show you now how easy it is to exceed those points. Now, many people prepare their morning oatmeal with 1 cup, that is 80 grams of oats, and this translates into 31 GL points. Remember, we weren't supposed to exceed 20 GL points per meal. Now you can only imagine that the points go higher after adding all the toppings and syrups and whatever people top their porridges with. So how do you make a low glycemic morning porridge? I suggest you watch my step-by-step guide to making low glycemic porridges up here. I'll also put the link in the description. Why should you care about stable blood sugar anyway? It's because it can affect your hormones, appetite, metabolic rates, and even how much fat you burn. In fact, studies show that lower glycemic carbohydrates make you feel full longer. Speaking of personal experience, high glycemic foods such as dried fruits and bakes made with flours drove me to candida overgrowth. You can listen to the whole story in this video. How to eat a low glycemic diet? Firstly, eat food that is grown, not produced. In other words, stick to whole plant foods. Secondly, avoid processed plant foods, as any processing increases the glycemic load. For example, prefer intact grains instead of flours and fresh fruit over dried varieties. To make this really easily graspable, steel-cut oats have GI of 55, while instant oatmeal reaches 79, and when we move on to breakfast cereals, we can get into 80s and 90s. Eat whole fruits instead of blending them together in a smoothie. Blending makes the carbs absorb faster, and also people tend to consume larger quantities when the food is liquid. If you love blended foods, have legumes. For example, blended lentils have the same low GI as whole lentils, and same goes for beans. It's because legumes have thicker, fibrous cell walls that protect the inner starch from disruption. So hummus is the way to go. However, remember that intact is still more beneficial. If you eat whole intact foods, there's more food for your gut bacteria. No matter how well we chew, the small bits and pieces left behind transport an array of prebiotic nutrients down to our good gut bacteria to feed on. Have 5 to 6 meal times a day. Besides main meals, you should find time to enjoy 2 to 3 small snacks. Feeling full also helps you at grocery store and fills your basket with healthy, nutritious food and not junk. Eat slowly and mindfully and stop eating when you're full. Don't eat while watching TV or YouTube or Netflix. You'll eat a lot more when doing so. Eat most of your calories during the first half of the day. If you stuff yourself during an evening meal, it will negatively impact your cholesterol and blood sugar control. Let's get on with low, medium, and high glycemic foods. Remember that the full list with specifications is in my low glycemic diet guide, which you can download following the link in description. Low glycemic foods are leafy greens, all the non-starchy vegetables, some root vegetables like carrots, beetroot, turnip, rutabaga, parsnips, nuts and seeds, berries, sprouts, oat bran and rice bran, soy products if unsweetened, unhulled lentils, beans and chickpeas, and fruits like apples, pears, kiwi, watermelon, and grapefruit. The list of medium glycemic foods: winter squashes, sweet potatoes, whole grains, and fresh fruit like pineapple, banana, mango. And the high glycemic foods that you should be avoiding on a low glycemic diet are all refined grains like white bread, white pasta, pastries, white rice, white flour, dried fruit, starchy vegetables like white potatoes and corn, then sweeteners, refined sugar, cane sugar, date sugar, coconut sugar, and processed breakfast cereals, for example, cornflakes, or any ultra-processed breakfast cereals. In the guide, I've included a table of foods to avoid and what to eat instead. For example, avoid white flours and consume whole grain flours instead, or even better, intact whole grains. I have many baking recipes up on my blog that don't use any flours. Instead, I make use of soaked whole grains. This works very well in case of muffin, bread, cracker, pancake, and cake recipes. What's more is that on my blog I've created a separate category for low glycemic recipes. Go and check them out. Next, I want to give you some very good tips on how to lower the glycemic load of some plant foods. You can let your cooked grains and potatoes cool down, best overnight, before you eat them. It's because cooking and cooling increases the resistant starch content. You can read more on resistant starch from the low glycemic diet guide. Next, you can sprout your grains and legumes before cooking. It's very easy to sprout them. I have several tutorials on my blog and here on YouTube. Eat foods in the whole state. That is, whole grains and legumes instead of flour or products made of flour, even whole grain flour. It's because the particles in flour are much smaller than in whole grains, and you therefore absorb the starches a lot faster, resulting in blood sugar spikes. And finally, avoid overly ripe fruits. For example, prefer green bananas over ripe ones and crunchy pears over really soft and juicy ones. To illustrate, green bananas come with the GI of 30, while ripe bananas GI is about 60, so that's twice as much. But let's not kid ourselves. Sometimes you still will eat something high glycemic. It's good to know that there are ways to diminish their effect on your blood sugar levels. Firstly, you can eat berries with your meals, because berries inhibit the enzyme that digests starch. For example, if you absolutely need to prepare pancakes or muffins using flour, add raspberries or blueberries into the batter or eat them with unsweetened berry jam. Or you can go for a brisk walk after a meal. Begin 30 minutes after the start of the meal. Eat pasta instead of bread because the particles in bread can be 1,000 times smaller and are therefore much more rapidly absorbed. The glycemic index of pasta is 55, whereas bread's GI may exceed 70. Eat sourdough bread that has incorporated sprouted grains and/or entire kernels, and prefer rye over wheat. The GI of wheat berries is 45, but rye berries go as low as 34. Surprisingly, freezing and defrosting as well as toasting the bread slices lowers the blood sugar response. For me, a brisk walk always works the best. In my guide, I also address high-fat versus low-fat, low-glycemic diet. So go download and find out which truly is the healthiest. Stay tuned for my plant-based low-glycemic recipe book featuring about 50 recipes with nutritional data including glycemic load points broken down for you.